streaming. Chris, no big hands. Don't pick your nose. That's the important thing. Hot mics, please.
What should we not say? Do you have a background relationship?
Yes.
We must, I don't think I have a copy of it.
Part of my screen.
No, for the questions. Just leave it in the middle. That's fine.
You know, I don't really notice, but myself from behind the podium, I wonder if I was barely.
You want us to get you a little box next time? So you okay.
Because they're, yeah, short people are supposed to.
Yeah, you usually keep an egg or not an egg carton, a milk carton or something like that on the truck and bring it in next time. Probably not. After hours.
Welcome to tonight's forum for the Democratic nomination for the 60th House District on the August 7th ballot. Before we begin, I'd like for us to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight's forums are being sponsored by the Jefferson City News Tribune. I'm Gary Castor, the managing editor of the News Tribune, and I'll serve as moderator along with News Tribune city editor Rebecca Martin. First, we'd like to thank the folks at City Hall for hosting this forum, as well as JCTV staff members who are live streaming this forum for us on newstribune.com. Before we begin the forum, I'd ask, prior to tonight, the candidates have been advised the rules of the forum. Tonight's forum will include a series of opening statements, general questions for all the candidates, and then some closing statements. None of the candidates have received the questions prior to the forum. Each will be given 2 minutes to respond to the question, and we'll alternate the order by which the candidate will be questioned so that each will have the opportunity to answer a question first. We ask you in the audience to refrain from expressing your support or opposition to a particular candidate by applause or making noise during the forum, as well as refraining from using a flash if taking photographs. And now let me introduce the candidates. To the far left, Nicole Thompson of Jefferson City. She's an occupational safety and health specialist. Bryan Shubik of Eldon. He's the owner of a floor laying business and a tax and accounting business. Molly Freebairn of Jefferson City. She's an energy and environmental scientist and executive director at Show Me Solar. Throughout the forum, we have questions here from the News Tribune staff, as well as we've accepted questions from our readers, and then some of you have also given us questions tonight to ask the candidates. Our goal is to ask as many of them as possible tonight. Those that we don't get asked tonight, we will be asking the candidates to respond so that we may publish those in the News Tribune in Sunday's paper, as well as subsequent days leading up to the election. The whole idea behind it is we want an informed electorate. You should know who you're voting for, and that's the idea of it. We appreciate the willingness of the candidates to respond to the questions and to just lay out what they believe and where they stand on these issues. So let's get started. All right, Nicole, so you drew the first question. So here we go. For years, the legislature has been studying the issue of state pay and how to fix it, with limited results. Do you believe state employee pay is an issue? And if so, how specifically would you try to fix it?
Yes, thank you. Well, I did work for Missouri Department of Labor and Industrial Relations for 9 years. And I was a workplace safety and health specialist there, and then a unit manager in Division of Workers' Compensation. And I can say that for my degree field specifically, as a workplace safety and health specialist, that we could double our salaries by leaving the state. And, you know, as those compensation surveys have shown, Missouri is 50th out of 50 in state employee pay, and our current pension systems do not make up for that gap in benefits. So I do believe that Missouri workers are very underpaid, and that it shows in the high turnover that we had. We certainly had a hard time keeping people in the OSHA consultation program, you know, where we spent a year in training. And then at the 2 or 3 year mark, a lot of people would leave to find different positions. So I think that in a lot of ways, Missouri can run more efficiently through higher pay. And I think, you know, certainly we need to look at our tax structures and figure out how we can increase those salaries. I know that we've recently had some corporate income tax cuts that I do not support, that I would like to see reinstated as one way to help our revenues and increase pay for state workers, which I do believe is desperately needed.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
It's very obvious that state workers are underpaid just by looking at the number of job openings that there are with the state government. It's come to light that we are very short on corrections officers in our prisons. I've talked to several corrections officers that are, quite frankly, very scared for their lives right now because of I do believe it's about 700 jobs or job openings that they have right now. That's going to lead to the possibility of prison riots. It's already leading to higher lockdown rates within the prisons. So we do need to be able to incentivize people wanting to work for the state again. It used to be the best job in town. Now it's the job that most people shy away from just because they can make so much more money out in the private sector. In order to do that, we do have to have the revenue in order to pay those employees. With a $241 million budget shortfall that we had in the last fiscal year, compounded by the new tax cuts that they just passed through the state legislature this year, we're really going to be behind the 8 ball on this one. This next fiscal year, we're probably looking at more cuts than we are going to be adding pay. I'd like to see both of those, the corporate franchise tax reinstated here in Missouri, as well as rescind the tax cuts that we just did. In addition, we have other possibilities for new revenue sources with the ability to tax online sales, as well as sports betting too. So,
Thank you. Molly?
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone said that Missouri's state workers are 50th in salary. Now they're the lowest and have been for any number of years. And I just want to say a little bit about what Brian was just saying about the situation and the staffing problem in the state prisons, which sounds so urgently dire, and what must be going on inside those prison walls that, you know, no one is even tracking, is, you know, something that needs to be addressed immediately. It sounds like a public emergency because, you know, prisoners are human beings, and as, you know, as are the state prison guards that are looking after them, and that is something that needs, you know, emergency funding. Now, we have funded, this is a recurring issue with so many issues in Missouri that are underfunded, like our, you know, our,
Keep going. Go ahead.
oh, thank you. So many things in Missouri are underfunded right now because we keep cutting taxes, as we have been doing since the Hancock Amendment in 1980. They've just been steadily cutting down. Now we established this beautiful state government back in the previous century and before, and so we know how to do these things. But yeah, in general, it has been with various forms of taxation, and so we can go back and see how we built our state government and the educational system and so forth, and you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
All right, thank you. So at this point, first of all, I'm going to apologize to the candidates because I told you I would give you an opening statement. Being the journalist I am, I just got to jump in and ask the question, so I'm sorry. There's just burning in my heart there. So we're going to start with an opening statement from each of you and then get back into the question. So we'll start with Nicole.
Thank you. My name is Nicole Thompson, and I am a workplace safety and health specialist. As I said, I worked for 9 years for Missouri Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. I was first an OSHA consultant and then spent 4 years as a unit manager in Division of Workers' Compensation. So that background has provided me not only with government experience to see how the administration works from the inside, but also, you know, my background is in regulatory interpretation, which I believe is a good asset to have to take to the Missouri legislature. I have a degree in occupational safety and health from the University of Central Missouri in Warrensburg and a master's of business administration from Western Governors University. Beyond that, I am from a rural area in Johnson County, Missouri. I was raised on a cattle farm. My dad's a full-time farmer. I moved to Jefferson City after I graduated from college in Warrensburg, and I married my high school sweetheart, Andrew. And we've lived here since then and have made Jefferson City our home. So.
All right, thank you. Bryan?
My name's Bryan Shubik. I'm a third-generation floor layer. Very proud of that. Also a small business owner with the tax and accounting business. When I'm not doing that, I'm helping out down on the family farm down in Hartville, Missouri, which is south of Lebanon, about 30 miles or so, where we raise cattle and chickens down there and hay when it's actually raining and the fields are growing. Hopefully we get a little bit today. I got into politics kind of by accident. Got involved with my county committee. Next thing I know, I was on the state committee and moved, just kind of kept on going with that. I decided to run because I've seen kind of the future for a lot of our rural communities when I had to go out of state in order to find work during the recession. If you travel up into Iowa or western Nebraska, you get to see towns that are completely shuttered up. The churches are gone, school districts are very consolidated. Kids are riding the bus 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes in order just to get to school. That's kind of the direction a lot of rural Missouri is heading because we're exporting 95% of our high school graduates. They graduate high school, they don't come back. The longer that keeps going, the bigger trouble that we are going to be in our rural communities. We've got to bring back rural economic opportunity.
Thank you. Molly?
Hello everyone, thanks for being here, and thanks to the Jefferson City News Tribune and City Hall for hosting us. I'm an energy and environmental scientist and strategic planner running for state senate because I care deeply about the issues affecting Missouri's quality of life. We rely on our elected officials to look out for us because people are busy leading their busy lives and raising their families. However, democracy dies in darkness with the wrong people in power, namely the Republican supermajority. Two dangerous developments that have arisen just since the last day of the legislative session are Senator Kehoe's new bill eliminating the state merit system and the Republican plan to cut state pensions, assisted by Bernstein, which together will deal a heavy blow to mid-Missouri's economy. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to circle back to the state employee pay as a follow-up question for each of you. So we'll start again with Nicole on this. The idea being this, if you're representing the Senate District number 6, a large portion of your constituency are state employees. You get outside of the 6th District, there are state employees elsewhere, but they're not nearly as concentrated. So this should be a huge issue for the senator from the 6th District. How do you intend to make this an issue for the rest of the state, that they can understand the effects that it has on this area and your constituents, and try to be really specific about whether you think the solution is a smaller workforce so we can pay better, or if we need to find the revenue for it and where we would find it.
Thank you. As you've stated, it is a big issue. The government workforce is a huge segment of our economy in the state, and though it is concentrated in Jefferson City, it is still, outside of agriculture. One of the major economic forces in our state is our government sector. That's where a lot of our workforce comes from. So I do believe that we need to increase pay. As I said, we have high turnover issues, and something that I didn't mention earlier, but in bringing up with some of the other issues with, say, corrections and that sort of thing, we're finding areas where, because of the poor management in some areas in our state administration, we're losing money through lawsuits. So I think through better management, we can actually find some sources of money by better managing our state government. I don't know that that necessarily means cutting the size of the workforce, because in a lot of cases, we're in need of additional employees. Now, I think where that affects the rest of the state is that government administrative system is, what people rely on to make sure that their unemployment checks come through, make sure that their employers are paying them on time. All of these things that we expect our government administration to do are, all run by everyday state employees. Now, we're already trying to improve efficiency in some areas, I know, through some additional computer systems, and there's a lot of cases where the computer systems that we use are ancient, and they need to be updated. And in some cases, we can reduce the size of our workforce through improved efficiency in some of our systems, including our computer technology. But I do believe we're going to have to find revenue in order to increase state worker pay.
Thank you. Bryan.
In order to get more revenue coming in, because I think shrinking the size of our state government isn't necessarily a great idea right at this moment. There's a lot of people that need services that when they call up to a state office don't get an answer. They don't get, I deal particularly with the Missouri Department of Revenue in my tax and accounting business, and I deal with a lot of very frustrated clients that get letters that are just randomly generated through the computer system, and they don't get eyes actually put on them. you get what you pay for when it comes to state employees. They're only going to work as hard as they get paid. In order to, when that happens, that affects everybody within the state. So everybody has a vested interest in their state government running as efficiently as possible. As I said before, we have a couple different sources for new revenue with the online sales tax, also with the ability to start doing sportsbook again, and the potential for legalized recreational marijuana. I mean, that it's out there. Anyone that doesn't think that you can't walk 5 minutes in any direction from where we're sitting right now and be able to find it, honestly has their head in the sand. And I think it's high time that we bring that out into the open and tax it.
All right, Molly?
Just to build on what's been said already, and yeah, with the overturn of the merit system, yeah, that is the idea that, if we'll cut some jobs in order to raise some other jobs. But we've already seen since the recession a reduction in force in state government of nearly 20%. And, this merit system overturn is calculated to, just further decimate and demoralize what is left of our state system. And that is something that should be of incredible concern to people around the state who are interested in good education, roads and bridges, agriculture, social services, the environment, clean air, clean water, clean land, clean food, conservation, employment, security, on and on. These are all state services that are crumbling. Our infrastructure, is built largely by the state. And, it was built by our forefathers over the last few hundred years. And since about the time of the Hancock Amendment, we've been neglecting it, and just cutting the funding and allowing it to crumble to the point that, if cutting taxes was the solution to the economy, we'd have a great economy by now. But instead we're seeing things just steadily declining, no solution in sight, and so it's time to turn around and start going back up the road and back to following, what has worked in the past.
All right, thank you.
All right, next question, we'll start with Bryan. At least two of you have come out publicly against the recently passed tax cuts by the legislature. Do you support or oppose those tax cuts? Explain your answer.
I do not support those tax cuts because when we're short on rent at our house, as the state government has been for the last couple of budget sessions, we don't go down to the bar and buy a round of drinks for everybody. And that's essentially what the state legislature just went out and did. Instead of picking up, a couple extra shifts or working a second job in order to make rent. This is just putting us, like I said, further behind the eight ball. We're already cutting services all over the place. We already have not reinstituted the prescription help for our poor seniors. We're already seeing some schools in our district that can only afford to go 4 days a week. What are we going to do next? Are we going to shut them down to 3 days a week? The children are our future, and if we're not willing to be able to fund that, what are we here for?
Molly?
I also do not support further tax cuts for all the reasons Bryan just gave. Plus, there are much larger tax cuts that have come into effect on the order of 25% tax reductions for the largest, for the business community for the largest incomes in the state, and those would be the ones that I would look to restore, the lion's share of the lost funding, quickly, so that we can turn around this crumbling of our infrastructure and the decline across the state in so many facets of our society before, people, like the suffering of the elderly and the disabled who've had their benefits cut, and the many people who've been denied health insurance, and the towns who are the rural towns around Missouri who are seeing their jobs and their way of life just go away. So many of these things, are really at this point, they've been allowed to decline and say, well, we need to tighten our belts, or those people need to tighten their belts. Well, they don't have belts. They need to live within their means. They don't have means. So, and these problems, we've talked about studying them for years. We know what the problems are and we know what the solutions are, but we need to turn things around and make it happen.
All right, Nicole?
I do not support the corporate income tax cuts as well, because I do not believe that they stimulate the businesses the way that is claimed. I mean, of course, once you have an established business, of course you want to cut those expenses, but the argument that is why a company would locate a business in our state, I think there's just too many other factors to say that the corporate tax rate is in any way a deciding factor on why a business is going to be located in Missouri. When we don't get something like the Amazon headquarters, it's not because of our tax rates, it's because of our lack of infrastructure or our lack of a university-educated workforce that can work in those corporate centers, or a lack of a solid labor force to work in the distribution centers. And the corporate tax rate is very secondary. If we look at some of the most vibrant areas in the United States, they're not areas with the lowest tax rates or with right to work. They can be more expensive places to live, but the thing is that they have jobs available to support those expenses. And I think in Missouri that we can establish that kind of vibrancy without leaving people behind. And the way to do that is not through corporate tax cuts, it's through supporting our infrastructure and our public education system.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple follow-up questions to that question. I'll start first of all with Nicole, since you just finished. So what is the vibrant manner in which the state should be able to do that?
I'm sorry.
So if it's not through tax cuts, you say it's through through infrastructure and public education. So how specifically does the state do that, and where does it where do you see the deficiencies in that?
Sure. By underfunding our public education system, we are not creating a vibrant workforce. When we have, schools that are going to 4 days a week, students aren't getting the education that they need that is going to be what businesses look for when they decide where they're going to locate their headquarters. We need more students going to college. We need more students in vocational trades. We just need everyone to be able to have a customized education that works for them, and that vibrant workforce. When I talk about infrastructure needs for businesses, it's saying, you can't locate a shipping or distribution business somewhere where you don't have accessible roads, where you don't have well-constructed bridges. You're going to be spending all of your money on vehicle repair, and that's going to be a larger factor in your decision-making on where to locate a business, where to start a business. And when I think of starting business as well and talking about that customized education, I would ask everyone, why aren't we starting our own businesses? And I would say the answers come down to whether you feel that you don't have the education that you need, or you just don't have the capital support that you need in order to start your own company. So those are the things that we need to look at. We need to look at internal solutions for Missouri that work for growing and building our businesses, and I think that's largely through infrastructure and public education.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The second question is a follow-up to something Brian said and you just mentioned as well. I believe the reference was there are school districts within the district that are going 4 days a week. I'm not aware of that. What districts are we talking about?
Actually, Nicole and I were just down there last night in Bell, Missouri. Bell, Missouri goes 4 days a week. And in many cases, because funding for their school just isn't there, I've talked to some of the school administrators over there. They're sharing one laptop between 2 classrooms.
Okay. Any other examples of districts within the?
Not necessarily within our district. If you go a little bit further south, I know Jolie Barber down in Lebanon is also going 4 days a week, and there are a few up in the north, but I couldn't give you the exact names.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's go to our next question, which we'll start with Molly. As a group, you've suggested the state needs to do more to address issues with the healthcare system. Explain what you think the state should do to improve healthcare access for Missourians.
Well, they need to listen to Missourians have been in the state capitol and been arrested for singing and you know, being in the Senate chambers, you know, up in the balcony, asking please to expand Medicaid for the you know, 300,000 Missourians who are lacking health care. And not only have they just steadfastly refused to do that, but I mean, they've turned around and cut even more funding for even more people who are, you know, the most at risk and, you know, in the most desperate situations. The elderly, you know, people who are dying and are extremely ill and disabled, and, you know, the elderly. And what they need to do is expand Medicaid. This will create a lot of jobs too, and this is federal funding for the most part that we can bring into the state and create jobs and, you know, provide the necessary assistance. And yeah, we need to do it fast.
Okay. Nicole?
Yes, I also believe that we need to expand Medicaid. That's just federal money that we're just saying no to. And that funding is necessary for our rural hospitals, where we have a lot of patients already on Medicaid, an additional, you know, group that could be supported by that additional funding, and without it, our rural hospitals are struggling and closing. So that's one major thing I would see for healthcare in Missouri. I think we also just need to find ways to reduce the costs of healthcare. You know, one example as far as, you know, improving our healthcare situation is, you know, I've talked to physical therapists in our state, and we could provide them, you know, with primary care provider status as a way, you know, one way to ease people through the system so that they don't have additional hospital visits that they have to go to in order to get their physical therapy. So there are some scenarios like that we can look at, and I think we just need to explore all of our options when it comes to healthcare, but the first and primary step is that we need to expand Medicaid in our state.
All right, Brian?
When the ACA was first coming out, I had a lot of tax clients. I had a lot of questions about the ACA and what that was going to mean for them. What we were able to find was a very large majority of our tax clients, especially in most of our rural areas, would have qualified for Medicaid expansion. Now, the issue there is we are short on funding in Missouri. So I'm not sure if we can necessarily pull off a Medicaid expansion because we don't know what's going to happen on the federal level. But I do believe one way to bring down cost and to help ensure more people is to give a public option for people to be able to buy into Medicaid or Medicare. I think that it would be the best way in order to get a lot of our small, poorer families in the area the help that they need. You just got to drive around. A lot of the houses I've knocked doors on. That there's a lot of people that have a variety of medical problems, and they don't get them addressed because going to the doctor is just unaffordable. And a majority of I'd say about 60% of our residents are one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. We have to do something to address that. Additionally, particularly in our rural areas, it's not just a matter of rural hospitals closing. I think it would be best if we had some more urgent cares that would be available in a lot of our rural areas. If you live out in, say, Iberia, and you're having a stroke or a heart attack where seconds count, chances are you're not going to make it to the hospital. It's easily a 2-hour drive in order to get to the closest hospital. So we have to have facilities closer by in order to be able to take care of that.
All right, thank you. Before we move on, I want to circle back on Medicaid expansion. All three of you, if I'm characterizing this correctly, are in favor of it. But given that there is a Republican sitting in the governor's mansion, there is a Republican supermajority that may or may not hold after this election, Medicaid expansion has an uphill battle and has had for multiple years. Why do you think that's still an option now? Molly? And let me limit you to 1 minute so we don't bog down on this too much.
I certainly hope it's still an option. I haven't heard that it's not. And on the federal level, I would also support Medicaid for all. Now, I guess the latest news item was that the Governor Parsons was cutting funding for was it people in hospice? It was people that were in need of health care, that whether it was, the increasing numbers of people on the autistic spectrum or the elderly, people on hospice, cancer patients, I forget, but he was called on the carpet and maybe hopefully is going to backtrack on cutting that kind of funding in the future, and hopefully, it's time for us to start, getting the Republicans, hopefully we can replace them, but otherwise change their mind before we're suffering.
All right, thank you.
is
Nicole?
taking place.
Sure. And again, I certainly hope that's still on the table. I'd hate to think that we are leaving Missourians behind just based on ideological grounds, and that, Medicaid expansion is something that we can look at. Although I am also willing to explore any and all other options that we can come up with to help get health care and health insurance, affordable health care to every citizen in Missouri. And whether that's going to be through health care savings accounts, I'm okay with that. I think that we can manage a system where we subsidize health care savings accounts. If it's a public option for Missouri, I'm comfortable with that as well. I think we just need to explore everything that we can and not just say no to our options, because we have to find solutions to this healthcare crisis that we're under. And I think that we have options, and we all have the same goal of providing affordable healthcare, so I just hope that we can get there.
Thank you. Bryan?
I think it's time that Republicans have to really ask themselves, what's the difference between being fiscally conservative and then giving a bunch of tax breaks out? You can't necessarily have it both ways. The thing I hear from a lot of Republicans is that they can't find qualified workers, they can't find people to fill jobs and everything. Part of that goes directly into having a healthy workforce. if people are healthier, then you'll have more people that can show up and work all 40 hours every single week. They'll be able to give you a better performance. If you're sick, you don't do as well at work. I think that the Republicans seriously need to look at that as an option in order to help build the workforce here in Missouri.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from a reader, Steve Bruce. During heightened awareness of the need for increased investments in school safety and child mental health supports, will you support legislative expansion of charter schools, voucher programs, or the creation of educational savings accounts that divert public funding from Missouri's public schools? Why or why not? And we'll start with Nicole.
I do not support any program that would divert funding away from our public schools. And this goes back to what I was saying about our educated workforce and having a solid education system that works for every citizen in the state. I do not see how we can support two systems when we're having a problem just supporting the one. So I think anything that's going to divert money out of our public schools is ultimately to the detriment of our communities, who are largely supported by their public schools. So I would support additional funding into our public education system and our, K-12 and university level education that we have in the state, and making sure that those are quality programs.
Okay, Bryan?
I do not support any money being diverted from public schools as well. Charter schools are not held to the same standards as our public schools are. It is a choice to send your kids to a private school or a charter school. The public schools are suffering as it is due to budget cuts and transportation cuts. There's just no room to be able to give money out to private interest, which is exactly what voucher programs and charter schools are.
Molly?
The News Tribune did such a good job last Sunday of covering this issue from the standpoint of all the candidates that are running in mid-Missouri, and what I heard from a number of the Republicans was, these poor communities that don't have the ability to pay more in local taxes are just going to have to tighten their belt and live within their means, In other words, and, I think we have to get people into state government who care in order to fix these issues. If our elected officials don't care about, the health and the well-being of the people, they certainly don't belong in state office, because their job is to look out. Their number one job is to look out for the well-being of the people of Missouri. And they're not doing their job. So that is why we vote and we have the ability to replace them. And I really appreciate forums like this to let people know, because they're busy leading their busy lives and they truly don't know till it hits home, and then, the damage is already done.
Thank you.
All right, our next question comes from a reader also. Stan Cowan asks, recently Governor Mike Parson invited a number of city mayors, including Carrie Turgeon of Jefferson City, to discuss ways the state can work with city governments to improve conditions for citizens. One of the concerns raised by the mayors was a growing trend in the legislature to preempt local control to enact some ordinances, such as regulation of plastic bags or increasing the minimum wage. Would you support or oppose state legislation that preempts city councils and county commissions from enacting ordinances that these local governments deem to be beneficial for their communities? And again, we'll start with Bryan.
Okay. I'm a firm believer in local control. Local control is the ultimate voice of the people, and the freedom to build your community the way that you want to see your community built. I do believe that the state seriously overstepped their bounds when they came in and stopped the city of St. Louis from raising the minimum wage, as well as Kansas City. State government had no business doing that. The people spoke up, and that's exactly what they wanted. And instead, the state government decided to side with big business. And if your business model is supportive of paying people a low wage so that the taxpayers can essentially subsidize your profits, you have a failed business model.
Thank you. Molly?
I agree. Yeah, I'm from St. Louis originally. The cost of living there is quite a bit higher, and there's no way people can live on anything, like minimum wage. My mom was in a nursing home there, and that was very understaffed, and the caregivers were very underpaid, and the business model, the for-profit business model, I don't know if they couldn't afford to raise wages to staff the nursing home to provide the care that the residents needed. I mean, the meals were awful. People had to sit there, for all day, waiting to get the care to be taken to provide their needs. And yeah, I would agree that that's pretty much of a failed business model. And yeah, I hope that these types of businesses could afford to raise the minimum wage. They seem to be doing quite well in other respects. The ban the bag in Columbia, I was close to following that issue, and it was because Columbia is a very progressive community here in mid-Missouri, and they want to lead the way in reducing the amount of toxic waste, or plastics that get out into the environment and do real harm to nature and wildlife. And they were shot down by one legislator's friend who didn't want to have to comply.
Thank you. Nicole?
Hi. Excuse me. I am also a very firm believer in local control. I do not think it is the state government's place to preempt a local jurisdiction on the codes that they want to set for within their own boundaries. I do not think the state officials have a better idea of what's in the best interest for a city or county when it comes to their own zoning or health codes or wage issues at the local level. However they want to set them, I think that's up to those cities. And the state needs to recognize that and, in a lot of cases, step back.
Thank you.
One more? Okay. This next question, we've had multiple readers ask about gun legislation, and a few have requested that before we give you your 2 minutes to flesh out your answers, we'll do kind of a one-by-one yes or no to a few things on whether you would support them. So we will start with Molly. And on each of those things, I'll go through all three of you, let you do your yes or no, and then you'll have 2 minutes. So first, Molly, are you in favor of expanding background checks on all gun sales, for example, closing what some would call the gun show loophole?
Yes, I believe 90% of Americans are as well.
Nicole, yes or no?
Yes.
Bryan?
Yes.
Okay. Again, starting with Molly, are you in favor of increasing the minimum age for gun purchase?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
Bryan?
That's a no for me.
Okay. Molly, are you in favor of bump stocks and high-capacity magazines?
No.
Nicole
No.
and Bryan?
I don't think it's a simple yes or no question. You know, I was taught to shoot by my great uncle, who was an Army sniper, and he taught me that, you know, make every bullet count. When you have a bump stock, it decreases your accuracy. But you know, there's a lot of them that are out there, and you know, you can't get them all off the market. So, I mean, you can't really fix that problem.
Okay. And semi-automatic and automatic weapons. Molly, yes or no?
Oh, okay, no, that's what I was thinking. I'm not a real gun person, but yeah, I'm not in favor of military, high-powered weaponry being on our city streets.
Okay. Nicole?
Can you clarify the question?
Yeah, are you in favor of semi-automatic and automatic weapons being allowed?
Okay, allowed? Yes.
And Bryan?
Well, I'm in favor of semi-automatic weapons being allowed. Fully automatic weapons are banned by the federal government, so it's kind of a non-issue.
Okay. And last one, arming educators. Molly?
Everything I've heard is that, you know, schools do not want to, you know, take on this responsibility of having their teachers packing weapons in the classroom.
Nicole?
No.
And Bryan?
I don't think it's a great idea, but at the same time, I do believe in local control. And in some of our rural communities where the response time is up to an hour and 45 minutes before the police can get there, I think that's up to the local school board.
Okay. So we didn't stick strictly to the yes or no, but we still will give everyone a chance to flesh out their answers on all of those, starting with Molly.
Well, I mentioned I'm from St. Louis, and yeah, that is a different situation than what, completely different perspective than what Bryan is talking about. And I would certainly respect the position of the people in the rural areas, because they're not the ones out, you know, doing these mass shootings anywhere that I know of. I feel that, you know, because I ran for state senate in 2014, and just walking down the halls of the Capitol, every Republican legislator had a picture of a gun, you know, in front of their office. That, you know, that, I mean, that they have really pushed and really sought to flood our society with firearms. And I think that's very dangerous. And, you know, and we see certainly in the cities that the, you know, the increase in homicides and violence, and, you know, to the point that, you know, our cities, our senators that are based in the urban areas are crying for assistance from the government to address these serious issues of violence.
Nicole?
Yes, as a workplace safety and health professional, I have worked with businesses to help them develop their workplace violence programs to prevent, you know, assaults within their workplaces. It's a thing in workplace safety that we say all accidents are preventable. And when we say that, we're saying that injuries at work are preventable, that you can go to work and then go home in the same condition that you arrived. And I think that it's time that we treated the gun violence issue in the general public in the same manner that we do when it comes to the workplace. I think that we can treat it as a public health issue and that we can find solutions. You know, that's my risk management perspective coming through is, you know, when I say that we don't need more guns in schools, you know, I don't believe we should be arming teachers. That's not to say that we shouldn't have, you know, trained security personnel in some of our rural schools. And I also, you know, believe that we may need separate gun policies for our rural areas versus our cities. But I think that we can look at and address these issues and start taking some measures like closing those background check loopholes and, looking at our gun policies from a public health perspective and deciding how we can start to prevent some of these incidents.
Brian?
Well, I've already kind of mentioned on where I stand with the arming teachers. As I said, I don't think it's necessarily a great idea. I don't think our schools can afford the very much increased liability insurance that will come with having weapons within their school. I am not in favor of raising the age on the being able to purchase a weapon because I've been taking my stepdaughter out hunting since she was 15. She's a good shot. My son is 12. He's looking forward to being able to go to youth season here real soon. Where my kids have gone to school, gun safety is actually taught usually in like 2nd or 3rd grade, with the thought process of if you take the mystery out of guns, kids are going to be less likely to, pick one up on accident. I have faith that I know that if my son would go someplace else and one of his buddies is like, "Hey, do you want to see my dad's gun?" He would be like, "No, I really don't, because if I wanted to see a gun, my dad will take me out shooting." Once you get out into the rural areas, the gun culture is quite different than it is here in the city.
All right, thank you. We are going to squeeze one more question in. We're going to shorten the time limit on the answer, all right? Because I think it's just that important of a question to ask. It was posed by 2 readers, Shelley Sawyer and Jeannie McGowan. So you're going to have 30 seconds to answer this question, all right?
No pressure.
What are your thoughts about limiting lobbyist gifts and contributions and more transparency in campaign finances? And specifically, do you support the Clean Missouri Amendment? And so we'll start with Nicole.
Absolutely. My whole platform is for a more open, honest, and responsive government in Missouri, and all of that goes straight to the heart of what I am aiming for, which is more transparency, and I fully support Clean Missouri.
Thank you. Brian?
I fully support Clean Missouri as well. I do believe we need more transparency. In fact, I watched the Mo Victory House Committee today come out on Facebook before I came up here, calling out David Humphreys on his cease and desist letter that they sent to him, as far as calling out the large donation that his PAC just gave to the Republican committee.
Thank you. Molly?
I also support Clean Missouri. A very strong case can be made that the reason why we have this supermajority of Republicans in the legislature is precisely due to the huge influx of financial backing, even from out of state. Because so much of the political influence on the national level has filtered down to the state level. They found that's a good way to further their objectives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with our closing statements. You'll each have a minute, and we'll start with Brian.
Okay. First off, thank you very much to the News Tribune for putting this on. I talk a lot in my stump speech about legacy. My grandparents were able to afford a house, have it paid for, be able to retire with a pension, benefits, and money in the bank. That is not the case for most of the working class Missourians anymore. It is time that we get back to the basics. It is time that we start bringing financial responsibility back to our government. And quite honestly, it's time to start raising the wages here in Missouri.
Thank you. Molly?
Republicans are doing a wonderful job of cutting taxes, which is great for those who are the few who are making the most money. but it is steadily reducing support for a healthy economy, high-paying jobs, education, roads and bridges, healthcare, Social Security. And this midterm election will be absolutely critical to repeal many of these terrible bills, including repeal right to work, raise the minimum wage, fully fund health care every year, and pay teachers a good salary, expand Medicaid, support the Farm Bill, raise the fuel tax. We can do all of these things. It's not that hard with the right people in office and create tens of thousands of jobs.
Thank you. Nicole?
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for coming out. Just to expand a little bit on my platform, I am running for an open, honest, and responsive government in Missouri. And what that means to me is that you have legislators who listen to their constituents, that you have bills that do exactly what they say they're going to do, and that you have a government that is efficient and flexible enough to meet the needs of the citizens of Missouri. So I would also like to mention that I have endorsements from Progress Women, Missouri's National Organization of Women, and a vote of confidence from Our Revolution Mid-Missouri. So I hope that you can all support me in my campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I thank all three of you for coming. We encourage voters to get out and cast their votes in the August 7th ballot for the Senate district race. And again, thank you for this evening. We're going to take about a 5-minute break so we can get the next candidates in and get things organized. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's going to need to be refilled for the next candidates.
Yeah, it's
A
a
little
little
bit.
warm up here. Absolutely.
Why did they not give you another microphone that came closer to you?
Oh, could you not hear me?
No, I could not.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry too, because I wanted to hear from everybody. Nice to be here.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm not really from rural Missouri, and I find it interesting. I've lived here for, 30 years, and I've met lots of people. I've looked at the state, but people who represent their heritage of growing farms and so forth. And so I find it certainly pertinent to the conversation. On the other hand, I worked in Kansas City for a long time. I'm not sure I have any political background that I would speak of there, but I guess I would. I know when I worked in the public library system, there were a good number of young people who were on the road. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that I thought that wasn't quite as appropriate as it should have been.
No, I'm sorry. I can't hear anything that's way back there. So
I'm sorry?
I can't. I didn't know anyone could not hear way back
Well,
there.
I didn't want to, I didn't feel as though I came in a little bit late. I didn't feel as though I was going to say it. But I just wanted to mention it so that another time it might be. Well, I actually thought another thing, and I might mention, is that Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Yes. That lapel mics might be really appropriate, and maybe they weren't available.
Probably not available.
Well, I probably speak some other gray hair. I have hearing aids, and they do assist with differential. But even in a situation like this, the person I could really hear, and I know this is maybe not one person, but I could really hear was Mr. Kessler. And I think that's important.
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Do you have any questions you'd like answered that you couldn't hear?
can't remember.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you want to talk to some truth, because I know there's some. Okay. Nice to talk with you.
Nice to talk to you.
Yes.
And if you grab some of my campaign lit that's on the way out,
No,
if you come up with any questions, my email's on there.
Okay.
Send me an email. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions I have.
I'll look and gather.
Okay.
Because I've heard you being here and met you, so I would like to know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And you can check out my website as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Kurt Schaefer.
Oh.
Yelling their heads off. I learned a long time ago when I was lobbying in front of Schaefer. I learned a long time ago, don't argue with Kurt.
We got a bad reputation. I'm not sure I've ever met him. His reputation's so bad.
I advocate in front of you.
That I thought was unfortunate is from what I received is the microphone was not as close as the others. Well, I'm glad I'm mentioning it then. Thank you. I know. It's okay. It's fine. Okay. I'm just glad I added.
So we're going to get started here again in just a moment, but let me ask, is there anyone here from the city that could help us with a couple technical questions? Okay, that being said, I'm going to go ahead and ask the candidates to come on up, and we will get them seated. We are trying to address the thermostat, first of all. It is rather warm in here, so I apologize for that. We're also trying to address the issue with the microphones and to make sure everybody can be heard.
They're going to put you on the right of me. Okay, you're going to go. Yeah. I would love one. You know, I don't think these microphones, well, maybe they are. They're like court. They're not they're just to record. They're not to.
No, they are live. Just pull them closer to you.
Well, I'm pretty loud anyway. That's not going to be an issue. But we will see. Here, how about you pour that a little bit out of the way? Is that okay?
Sounds good. All right.
You guys good?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Whenever.
Yeah. Let me get that. I'm sorry. Aesthetically, it'll be out of the picture that way.
Kevin.
Hi. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. That's for going ahead and look for 3 candidates. Nope. Well, I didn't.
I wasn't counting.
All right.
It is warm. It is warm in here.
I was noticing that. I stepped out for a minute,
Just to
came
get
back in and really.
lots of bodies. Maybe they could do that on purpose so people won't stay long at the city council meetings. I don't know. Yeah.
All right, folks, if I could get you to have your seat, we'll get started with the Democratic candidates from the House 60th. All right, so I will say we were trying to address a couple issues. If you weren't in here earlier, we're trying to adjust the thermostat where it might be a little bit more bearable in here for some of us, including myself. And the other is I've asked the candidates to speak loudly. We've pulled the microphones a little bit closer, so the hope is that you can better hear what all of us are saying. So we're going to get started. So we have 2 candidates. both Democrats who are seeking the 60th House District seat. Kevin Nelson of Jefferson City, he's a nurse and a business owner. And Sarah Michael of Jefferson City, who's a family law attorney with Carver and Michael. All right? So this time, I think we'll start with opening statements. We'll try something novel here. So Kevin will start. He'll have a minute for his opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to start by saying thank you for coming out tonight and being a part of this. And also, I want to thank the News Tribune for holding this forum for us. I want to thank those who are at home watching the live stream as well. I am a United States Army veteran and a healthcare worker for the last 22 years and a small business owner. And I know the value of service. And what I want to do is provide my service for you as a state representative in District 60. So I'm asking for your vote this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. My gratitude is expressed as well to everyone involved tonight. Thank you. As was mentioned, I am a lawyer here in town. I've practiced family law exclusively since starting, and I've lived in Jeff for 22 years, 18 years of which I have been a small business owner. And I know the hard work that it takes to make that business stay successful, as well as the benefits associated with being a small business owner. I'm the proud mother, most days, of 2 children, Ethan, who's a sophomore at Elias, and Audrey, who will be in the 8th grade at St. Peter's. And though they attend Catholic school because of our faith, I personally am the proud product of a public school education. My father was a elementary school PE teacher, and my mother was the high school secretary at the local high school in Carrollton, where I grew up. And I am running because I believe that the government has lost track of where its focus is supposed to be, which is on the people. Instead of government serving the government, they need to be serving its citizens. And that has motivated me to use honesty, integrity, and the energy that I have to seek this office. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're going to dive into our questions. Some of them you may have heard previously. First one you did. Multiple readers asked questions about gun legislation. We're going to ask you 4 questions, a simple yes or no answer. I'll give you an opportunity to explain your reasoning later. So here we go. We'll start with Kevin. Are you in favor of expanding background checks on all gun sales, closing what some have called a gun show loophole?
Yes, absolutely.
Sarah?
Yes.
Are you in favor of increasing the minimum age for gun purchases?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Are you in favor of allowing bump stocks and high-capacity magazines?
No, I'm opposed.
No, I'm not.
Are you in favor of allowing assault weapons such as semi-automatic or automatic weapons? Kevin?
No, I am not.
Because of the I'm going to have to say yes.
Arming educators, teachers, others who are in the school, are you in favor of it? Kevin?
Pardon me?
Arming educators?
No, I am not in favor of that.
Sarah?
I know you're expecting a yes or no answer, but the question
Yes,
is
I am.
really difficult to answer yes or no.
Pretend I'm
So
a
if I was
judge.
forced under oath, I would say yes.
Okay.
But I get to expand on that.
Yes, ma'am, you do. All right, so this is where we're going to expand on it. We'll start with Kevin. You have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. Yes, as a United States Army veteran, I'm well aware of assault weapons and the damage that they can do to the human body. And I know that the place for those weapons are not on our streets, but in war zones. So that is the reason I am vehemently opposed to having assault weapons on our streets. I do believe that educators go into that line of work because they want to educate our children, and they would do whatever they can to help those children. But as far as arming educators, I don't think that's the right route for us to take. I think that that's putting an undue burden upon our educators as well. And there are other means that we could perhaps look at to take care of that. So, no, on gun violence, I stand opposed to it because of those reasons. I am in favor of common sense gun reforms.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment, and I believe that reason should always take precedence over emotion. And so in the area of background checks, expanding those, making them universal so that each state has the same criteria that it's utilizing when determining, and maybe that will, well, maybe, at least, no, I believe that the states themselves should make that determination, but I do believe that universally we should have access to that information from state to state as to the background checks that have been performed in other states. So expanding it in that way, I think, is absolutely necessary. I don't believe that someone who's just been committed of domestic assault and who clearly solves their problems with violence should be entitled to go and purchase a gun. If you're on the no-fly list, I don't think you should be able to purchase a gun. But I do not believe that I think there's a difference between semi-automatic weapons and automatic weapons. I have a number of friends who have, on the law enforcement, who have educated me on this issue, and there is a difference between the two. And though I do not believe automatic weapons should be available, there's simply no need. I agree with Kevin when it says those types of weapons are used for slaughter. There's simply no need to protect yourself with that type of weapon, in my opinion. As for schools, the question asked about arming personnel, I do believe teachers have committed their lives to our students, and I do not think that it's appropriate to ask them or require them to take a step with regard to arming themselves. But at the local level, like in the rural school districts, if they within themselves in that district decide that their students and their community would be better served by a school resource officer being available who's armed, or some other personnel well-trained with significant and serious criteria about your ability and your responsibility with holding and possessing that firearm, then I think that decision should be left to the local school districts.
Thank you.
All right, our next question also comes from readers Shelley Sawyer and Jeannie McGowan. What are your thoughts about limiting lobbyist gifts and contributions and more transparency in campaign finances? Do you support the Clean Missouri Amendment? I'll start with Sarah.
Okay. Well, the easy answer to that is yes, I support the Clean Missouri Amendment. I also support limiting lobbyist gifts and the items that the legislature receives from them. The most important thing, though, in my opinion, because the lobbying aspect of this has been well addressed for many years, is the issue of dark money and the transparency associated with campaign contributions. The Supreme Court holding that dark money can be given, does not have to be accounted for, allows access to those serving the people who they're supposed to be serving. It's undue access, and it's simply just too much. And so yes, I support Clean Missouri, and I believe that there should be transparency. It seems unreasonable to me that an individual out here is limited in the amount that they can give me and must account for the same as far as telling me whether or not they have a contract with the state of Missouri and how much they can give per election. But a PAC or dark money is basically unlimited and unaccountable, and that is, in my opinion, is what has led to significant problems that our government here in the state of Missouri is facing today.
Kevin?
Thank you for the question. I am absolutely in favor of Clean Missouri. And one of the reasons that I got into politics was because I wanted ethics reform. I was tired of seeing what was going on up here in our state capitol, and I heard back in 2016 that was going to be a primary focus in our House of Representatives. And what I saw was the opposite of that. So I am in favor of Clean Missouri, and I feel that influence should not come from lobbyists. Influence should come from your constituents, the people that you are sent there to represent. That is the influencing factor in what I'll be basing my decisions upon. And the fact that this has gone on for so long, with dark money being introduced through the Supreme Court allowing that in Citizens United, we've seen what it's done firsthand to our state when dark money comes into our state. And I, for one, want to make sure that ethics reform is actually dealt with in the House of Representatives here in Missouri. So yes, I am in favor of the Clean Missouri initiative.
Thank you. So our next question comes from an audience member, Eliza Miller. A combination of events, data, and the passage of SB 43 led the NAACP to issue a travel advisory for Missouri. If elected, how do you plan on addressing this issue and making Missouri a safe place for all, especially people of color? Kevin?
Yes, absolutely. We have to walk back that legislation. That basically allowed discrimination in our state. And it was appalling when that came about. And I understand why Mr. Chappell put that message out through the NAACP. And I think that what we have to do is we have to go back and we have to make sure that this is not the law in Missouri, because this is what people hear. That, for example, went out to several states and across the nation. And that's what people were seeing when they looked at and heard of Missouri. But that's not Missouri. That can't be what we are. We can't go back to things such as that. We can't allow discrimination in our workplaces and against our people in Missouri. So we have to back that up.
Thank you. Sarah?
Well, the first step that I would take is actually have a conversation with the NAACP with regard to the travel advisory. No one from the Missouri government, after that travel advisory was issued, even reached out to the NAACP or Mr. Chappell to discuss the same. It was more like, which is a terrible reflection on us as a state, because we aren't that. We're a diverse group of people. We want the idea is that everyone has an opportunity. Everyone should be treated the same. That is truly what should be making Missouri great. So yes, we have to walk back SB 43. We cannot allow what can only be seen as the endorsement of discrimination to become state policy. It's more than offensive. To not even be willing to open up the lines of communication and even ask the people that had issued the travel advisory, what can we do different? What has made you feel this way? Communication is what matters. That is the starting point for everything. And so we start with the communication. We find a method that addresses these problems the most efficiently and, if possible, the most quickly, and work together as a people to reach the outcome that gets us past this ugly place.
Thank you.
All right. A common theme in many political campaigns today is that there should be less government interaction in our daily lives. Where specifically do you believe there should be less intervention? And if you're so inclined to answer this way, where do you believe there should be more intervention? And we'll start with Sarah.
Well, that's a pretty good question. I work with people every day who, in one way or another, are touched in some way by some sort of rule, regulation, or law. Whether it's as simple as dealing with a municipal violation or applying for state aid. And areas where I think the government is too involved is probably in our personal lives. I don't think that I should be told who my friends should be, and I don't think I should be told who my friends can't be. That is beyond and above what the government should at all be involved in. Where do I think the government should be more involved? I think the government should stop trying to step out of, well, let me start this again. I think the government should stop trying to curry favor with corporations that aren't coming to Missouri for tax purposes and start serving its citizens, whether that is through aggressive efforts to improve the infrastructure, not only just roads and bridges, but also the broadband abilities and stretching it out into the rural areas so that those areas can thrive, or dealing with addressing the issues within our education system. That's where the government should actually become more involved instead of less involved. And I would ask the government become less focused on the cronyism that has become rampant in the General Assembly.
And a quick follow-up, I'm interested if you could be more specific with your first example of too much involvement in personal lives.
Well, it's not that, don't misunderstand, it's not that I think that there are rules or regulations out there that tell me who I can or cannot be friends with. Obviously, I don't believe that. But so often, the social issues, or what stereotypically called the social issues, drive policy approaches. I served in college many, many years ago. I interned at the state capitol and saw what people with real problems and real issues come up and ask for assistance from their legislature. You know, the social issues have become such a focus that we're missing, there's more to it than just the social issues. And if I could just add something, because I work in the area of family law, and I know this is very focused area, but one thing that I think the government is way too involved in is trying to tell us, and this is an example about who my friends can be and who my friends can't be, how to litigate or resolve a situation where two parents can't be in the same household anymore. Every guy who's had a problem, guy or gal, who's had a problem in their marriage, goes and talks to somebody, and they've gotten burned in some way. So they go to their legislator, who then wants to fix it through legislation. Every fact, circumstance is absolutely independent of each other, and there has to be discretion left within the judges to make that determination based on the facts and circumstances that are presented to them. This is one way that I see and experience every day, where the legislature thinks they can take one paintbrush and paint a color over every fact circumstance that presents it in any circumstance where there's children involved, and that is just absolutely not true, and not effective, and not problem solving.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to hear the question again?
Please.
A common theme in many political campaigns today is that there should be less government interaction in our daily lives. Where specifically do you believe there should be less intervention, and where do you believe there should be more?
Well, I would, as a small business owner, I would like to say that I believe in jobs and I believe in small business. And if we could make it an environment rich for small business owners with less intrusive impact on that side of the government, I would be in favor of that. And as far as where could more government help come into play, Medicaid expansion. They could definitely step up there. We are leaving federal dollars on the table. We're leaving Missourians unattended to, and that's where I see, as far as yes and no on less and more from our government.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin, next question will go to you. For years, the legislature has been studying the issue of state employee pay and how to fix it, with limited results. One of our audience members asked the question specifically, what are your plans for state employee salary raises?
And thank you again for that question. And yes, I have heard part of that earlier. 50 out of 50 is terrible. We're a better state than that. We're a better people than that. And we know that in order to hire and keep employees, you have to pay them a decent wage. Missouri's not doing that right now, so we need to do better. We have looked at this problem over and over, and every time it comes back the same. About 13% is where we would have to get up to if we're to meet with our neighbors as far as state pay. And that's just terrible that we have fallen that far behind. And I'd like to see some of the misguided tax policy. We have invested heavily in tax cuts with Missouri. Our legislature has invested there. I would have rather seen us invest in our employees, but that has not been the case. So I would look definitely at trying to, and it's difficult. The Hancock Amendment, probably most people are familiar with that, kind of cuts what we can do in the legislature as far as what's been done with tax cuts. But I would look at revisiting some of those tax cuts in order to pay our state employees' wages.
Sarah?
It starts with, obviously, we can only pay what the budget can afford. But that takes us at least 2 or 3 steps back to deal with the issue of how do we fund the budget and how do we fund the general revenue. And the corporate tax, and to be clear, it's the corporate tax breaks that have had the most negative impact on our budget and our general revenue. If Governor Parsons signs the newest bill, then we are facing, or we can be proud of ourselves that we will be second in the nation for the lowest corporate tax rate. And I understand that the argument is that with lower corporate taxes means you're enticing businesses to come here. But if that were true, since we're in the top 10 before we even put this bill into law, why aren't we in the top 10 of corporate locations in the nation? We are not. So that is a misguided approach to how to entice business, and again, gets back to feeding the hand that is, or, with the dark money and the big business over little man, over the little people. I want to see the little people survive. So as to the state employees specifically, we have to first start with addressing the issues, which is the budget and the general revenue fund. Then we have to, and Kevin or I will be sitting up there trying to convince the other legislatures who don't have a state employee base as large in their districts as we do, as to why it's important. And it's important because the entire state is serviced by the people that work here in Jefferson City. Every constituency is touched in some way by the quality of employees that we have right here in Jefferson City. So if we get them on board with just simple logic and reason, because it seems to make sense, then the next step is to how to fund it. And we will have to fund it. And I agree, a significant raise is necessary. We can't, it'd be nice for Missouri to be in the positive press nationwide once in a while instead of the negative. And to be 15th in the nation in this issue is simply cannot stand.
Okay, so I'm going to circle back on this because you touched on the premise of the question I had in the previous forum, in which you have a sitting Republican governor, you have a supermajority in the legislature of the Republican Party, both which are strong proponents of the tax cuts. So I guess I'm asking, you can say if we can roll back the tax cuts and we can sweet talk to our neighbors there in the House and get them to buy in that state employees are valuable. I guess my question is, one, do you really think that's going to fly? And two, what's the backup plan? Because for upwards of a decade, there has been this posturing that when the economy improves, state employees will be compensated better. We don't want to be 50th. So what's the backup plan? Kevin?
Well, I agree. We should have probably more Democrats there so we could get this done. We have to get this done, and we have to be able to convince our colleagues in the House of why it has to be done. I think that with proper motivation, we can come up with a plan to pay our state employees a wage that's livable. And if you present that appropriately, I believe that common sense should win out in that arena. I believe that we need to make sure that we're trying everything we can. We can't just say, well, we're not going to work at all with somebody. All right. I believe that we have to at least try, and that would be my plan. We have to try. And I have spoken with other legislators who are currently in the House and already telling them about the importance of why we need employee raises.
Thank you. Sarah?
I agree. It seems like an uphill battle. And one of the things that I've struggled with my entire adult life is I have difficulty with people who can't see the logic in things. I don't always necessarily have the best ideas, but a lot of the time I do. And so I'm struggling with this idea of, well, how can you not see the logic behind this? That improving our state wages means, in turn, enticing and drawing in quality personnel. If you have complaints about an agency and the job that it's doing because of the personnel contained within, then you fix it by fixing the personnel. You get better personnel by paying them more money. People don't come, and working for the state of Missouri, when I first moved to Jeff, was a real pride. I mean, it was a sense of pride that you were serving your state and that you were supporting your family while doing it. It's not that like it was anymore. So as far as a backup plan, because let's be honest, we can't be overly naive on how convincing we're going to be. There was some mention and question with regard to lowering the workforce, and I just don't, that has already happened. You know, Missouri Department of Transportation has let go of a number of employees. It hasn't made a change in what they've received as far as compensation, and it's negatively affected the people of Missouri. The Department of Corrections is struggling. It's negatively affecting the Department of Corrections directly and the people of Missouri because of the dangers that those corrections officers face, which lead to compensation for the injuries and the difficulties that they face. So lowering the workforce is not the best option either. The backup, I mean, to create a backup plan without additional information with regard to what are the options are would be difficult. But I'm going to try as hard as I can to convince, to make people just see reason,
Thank you.
All right, and starting again with Sarah. What are the biggest obstacles to job creation, both in the 60th District and Mid-Missouri area, as well as across the state, and what would you do about it?
The biggest obstacles, in my opinion, to job creation are simply the nature of what's available to start the job. That sounds silly, but simple, but the reality is the infrastructure itself is one of the obstacles. Okay, so we've complained and we've heard from many about the difficulties and the disrepair of our bridges and roads, but the broadband access to rural areas would be of huge enticement to business creation. You could start a small business in the middle of nowhere, serving a need, delivering a product, employing individuals, if you had access to high-tech communications and broadband, which is something that the Missouri co-ops are working on, but not with much assistance from the state government. That, I think, is a big impediment to job creation. A living wage within the 60th District specifically, and the support of your government, because we're a company town. Jefferson City is a company town. Our biggest company is the state of Missouri. So my district's biggest company is the state of Missouri and its employees. And there has to be some acknowledgement of that, whether it is paying those wages so that people are enticed to come to Jefferson City, which then leads to revenue stream within the city of Jefferson and within the 60th District that feeds additional small business. That is another opportunity. But there are jobs out there. We just don't necessarily have all the people to fill them. And training people and making a strong, solid, energetic workforce needs to be a focus of the government as well.
Right. Kevin?
If we want some of these larger businesses to come into our district and into our state, we have to provide a workforce that is ready to go to work. And I do believe that we could have a little bit of a problem with the skills gap at the moment. And I think that also another obstacle to job creation would also be infrastructure as well. And when I say infrastructure, I include that in with the highway system, internet, the entire infrastructure system. And so many things are done online these days. All job applications, they're filled out online. Small businesses run out of the home. So infrastructure, as far as being able to have access to good broadband around the state, even in rural areas, is hugely important. And that's something that we need to look at. I believe that it's partially incumbent upon state government and utilities, as far as utilities go, to look at that. So infrastructure, as far as highways and so forth, Missouri has the 7th largest highway system in all of America. And unfortunately, we have a lot of roads that are in need of repair. We currently have about 800 and something bridges in need of repair. So we have to make sure that, number one, companies looking to come into our state will have a workforce that can do the work, and we have to provide a good infrastructure that's enticing them here.
All right, thank you. So let's begin with our closing statements. We'll start with Kevin.
Well, again, I'd like to say thank you for everybody for coming out tonight. And I just want to say that my campaign has really never been about me. It's been about you, because I work for the people of Jefferson City. That's what I'm working to do. I want to make sure that when I go to the House of Representatives here in Jefferson City, that you know that I am accountable to you. I'm asking for your vote on November 7th, and again, I thank you for coming out, and I thank the News Tribune. Thank you.
Sarah.
I'd also like to thank everybody. It's gotten warmer in here considerably since we started our panel, so I can appreciate your patience. I am committed and passionate about people. One of the questions that the News Tribune asked me when we did the initial government is, what are you passionate about? And the first and most obvious answer is my children, because I really do like them most of the time. But people in general are what move me. My father instilled in me that giving more than you get is how you make your way through life. And I've been lucky in my life. God graced me with a strong brain and a strong opinion on most things. And I've utilized that to do good, I hope, and make people's lives better. I know that what we need in state government is people who actually care about what happens to you and not look at it as a step up or a step to some other better, lucrative, more fiscally beneficial position. And I believe that I can be the one that takes your voice to the government and makes something happen, or actually prevents something bad from happening if possible. Thank you.
All right. Kevin and Sarah, thank you very much. Again, we appreciate your attendance and answering the questions. And we're going to take a short break, and then we'll begin again with the Republican candidates for the 60th District.
Thank you. Thank you. It is warmer. Maybe it's under the lights. And I don't have nearly as many clothes on as you guys do. Yes. You keep these? You keep these? Okay, there you go. You can write it. Do you want me to sign the inside? We can autograph each other's. July 19th, 2018. Oh, we're going to ask somebody. Why did you mention that to me?
I saw her just turn it down, so we'll do what we can. But I wasn't coming in a tank top, so it wasn't going to happen. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. Hi there. Appreciate you recovering. Going well. Going well. Did you get my email earlier? I did. I thought you had more questions, and that's all I got to look at it. So that's okay. Dig deeper. That's good. Yeah. It allows us to get more info out there. So that's good. Good. What's your deadline on that? Okay.
So I think we're going to resume again here momentarily. So if you can kind of make your way to your seats, we will get this thing started.
I'm fine, thanks. I was looking to see if there was a vent up here.
We're gonna.
There we go. Good. Joe, how are you?
Good to see you.
You too. Can you guys turn down the heat? Oh my gosh! Is this so it goes faster? You just keep turning the heat up like little frogs in a pot, you know? So,
They don't mind.
oh no, I'll be able to tell. Okay, we can't start Gary with that water. It's coming. Oh my God, I'm so hot.
We're replenishing our water supply up there for the candidates. Were you better able to hear in the back of the room? Good. So again, I'll remind the candidates, put the microphone as close to you as possible so that they can hear you clearly. So. All right, so we're going to begin our third part of our forum. And I will forewarn you, we're going to go a little bit past 8 o'clock, obviously. I'd like to give these candidates at least 30 minutes of questioning. And so we think there are some good questions to be asked. So let me introduce our candidates. So we'll start on the left, Dave Griffith of Jefferson City. He's a veteran, retired, but previously worked in the home mortgage and insurance businesses and communications. He spent 2 stints with KRCG. He served as twice elected 5th Ward City Councilman, then moved on to be the Executive Director of the American Red Cross of Central and Northern Missouri. Next to him is Jane Beadham of Jefferson City. She's been involved in low-profile activities around the city, including planting fruit trees and perennials outside the Boys and Girls Club, starting a garden at the Samaritan Center, and writing about 20 National Register propositions for properties in Jefferson City. She also represented Missouri on the Midwest Radioactive Materials Transportation Committee. And to her left is Pat Roker of Jefferson City. She's the founder and former chief executive officer of Associated Court Reporters, Inc., the former state of Missouri Veterans Ombudsman, and a retired state employee. So we will start with an opening statement. Each of you will have a minute, and we'll start with Dave.
Hey, thank you. My name is Dave Griffith. My wife and I have lived in Jefferson City for over 30 years. For the last 6 years, I worked for the American Red Cross as the executive director of the Central and Northern Missouri chapter. I said grace over 29 counties every morning. I was deployed 5 times. I did three hurricanes and 2 Missouri flooding Before that, I worked for Channel 13 on and off for 23 years. I was elected twice to the city council. Matter of fact, this was my seat that I sat in. This is Mayor Turgeon's seat that she sat in. So, in the time that I spent really in the military, in serving as a Green Beret in the 8th Special Forces Group, really gave me the base of my life. It gave me the leadership skills, it gave me the compassion, and really made me into a humanitarian. And what I hope to be able to do as your next representative is to be your voice in the Capitol.
Thank you, Dave. Jane?
Recently, I was knocking on doors, and I knocked on a door of a person I'd never met before, and he said, "Oh, Jane Beadham, I've heard good things about you. I want to vote for you." And I said, "Oh, that's great." So I invite all of you tonight here and watching this to vote for me on August 7th. That's a Tuesday. Don't forget it. I moved here to Jefferson City 35 years ago after marrying my husband, John Beadham. We have 2 children who we raised here in the community. They are now in their 20s. And I worked for state government in the Department of Natural Resources for 25 years, where I, in the director's office, had a wide variety of experiences in budget, legislation, working with other state agencies, and representing Missouri on a national level. So that was a variety of experiences I would like to bring to Jefferson City to help better our community. I'm pro-life, I'm pro-gun, and I hope that you believe with me, we want to see Jefferson City thrive and grow, because if we're not moving forward compared to other cities, we're sliding backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pat?
I'm Pat Roker, and as you all know, I am running for the 60th. My husband and I have been married for 29 years. We have a blended family of 4 children. We've been spending a lot of time at the hospital. I have an MBA in healthcare admin. I didn't want to use it there but with our second oldest daughter, but spending nights there during the week. And I've lived in Jefferson City for just about 39 years. And Jefferson City has changed a lot. I've always been involved in legislative issues because as a court reporter of over close to 25 years, just in case I'm off, I was in the location that had to work on pieces of legislation to help save jobs for our court reporters. I am a conservative. I am pro-life. I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. I have been a businesswoman for many, many years. We owned 3 businesses, my husband and I, and I value my Christian background, and I hope that my experience will bring change that we need in Jefferson City as we stand up to bureaucrats. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dave, we're going to start with you. Reader Stan Cowan asked this question. Recently, Governor Mike Parson invited a number of city mayors, including Carrie Turgeon of Jefferson City, to discuss ways the state can work with city governments to improve conditions for citizens. One of their concerns was a growing trend in the legislature to preempt local control to enact some ordinances. Would you support or oppose state legislation to preempt city councils and county commissions from enacting ordinances that these local governments deem to be beneficial?
I think what Governor Parsons did really is a step in the right direction and bring mayors into the Capitol and really opening a conversation with them to discuss some of the concerns that he has, some of the concerns the legislature has in what some of the cities are doing. For the government to override and to tell local governments exactly what and how they can do it, I'm not so sure I'm in favor of that. I think that what we need to look at is collaboration that we're going to have between state government and between local governments. Laws cannot be enacted on a local basis that usurp what's going on in the state. That needs to be done and go through a process. And through that process, I think we can reach an agreement where both sides may not be happy on all accounts, but I think that what can happen by having that conversation is that they can understand where the state's coming from, and I think the state can understand where the cities are coming from, and I think that's what it's going to take.
Jane?
I agree that a strong partnership between state government and local governments would be a way to be more effective and to work toward the similar goals. However, I think that the cities only have powers that are not reserved for the state. So there are some things where more local control is appropriate, and I would recommend that, but I wouldn't recommend a blanket change, because there are some programs where cities shouldn't be allowed to make those changes. Let me give an example. Smoking would be an area where cities have and can make changes and decide that their restaurants and bars should be smoke-free, and that's appropriate. We want to make sure that our businesses that operate in multiple communities are not overly restricted. So there may be some things that one city wants to do that won't work for these businesses. So we need to work with our businesses as well, and try and keep as consistent as possible. State tax collection, for example, that should be somewhat consistent from city to city. Other things like eminent domain, those are state laws, and the city shouldn't be allowed to make those decisions on their own. For one thing, it's a little tempting for cities to want to take over private property, and I'm all for private property rights. So I don't want cities to get too tempted to do things like that. So I think it depends largely on what the situation is. I'm in favor of local control for a number of things, just not unlimited.
Pat?
Thank you, Gary. At the end of the day, I support our local areas having their own control. I don't think that we should be telling our schools how to run their business at the local level. I don't think we should be telling our communities how they run their business. What I found as working as your state veterans ombudsman, we brought in the agencies within all the state to have a collaboration, to listen and have a conversation. So having a meeting with our state officials and our local level folks, that's a great idea, because we don't have time, nor do we have money to reinvent the wheel. So we can learn from someone else, as both as legislators and as other state leaders and community leaders, and that's a great thing. I think that both of the competitors touched on some very smart things that relate to local control. However, I never want to restrict our freedoms, and that's where we have to look within ourselves to say, is it the state's job to be holding this, being the bearer of this particular issue, or is it that of the local entity?
Well, circling back on that question then, two specific examples that I asked in the previous forums related to plastic bags in Columbia and minimum wage. Minimum wage in St. Louis and Kansas City, both approved by the local folks, but the state overruled it. So what's your position on that?
Me? Okay. Well, I think that what we've got right now, and as far as the St. Louis and Kansas City and trying to raise the minimum wage, I think the state ruled in the proper way. I think that when we start justifying the wages that we have in our communities, what's going to happen in Springfield, what's going to happen in Joplin, what's going to happen in Jefferson City or in Kirksville. The economy drives the market, and I think that what the minimum wage is, we've had increases in minimum wage. Going back when I first started working, minimum wage was 75 cents an hour. So what we've got right now is, for me, is adequate. And as far as plastic bags go, I really don't have an opinion on that. I think that a lot of people are bringing their own, those that are environmentally concerned, and we have a lot of people that are, and recycling, we've instituted that here in Jefferson City. We did that when I was on the city council. So I think we've got alternatives to the plastic bags. I think we've got people bring their own bags to the grocery store. I think we can ask for paper if we want to. So I think that the people can make that choice. And here again, I think we can also work with the mayors of those cities to try and come to an equitable solution.
Okay, so I'm going to circle back, and I'm going to narrow the focus, because I should have asked a better question. So that's on me. Let's just stick with the minimum wage. All three of you said local government should have control over the decision. In this instance, the state and the local governments said, in our area, we want the minimum wage to be at this level. The state came in and said, no, it's the state level, that's the maximum. Do you believe that the state should have done that? Dave?
I believe the state should have done that. I think that's one of the things that we look to our legislature and we look to our Senate to help give us guidance on. I think as we work with cities, to be able to, I know it sounds contradictory to say we want to give some control to the cities, but I think that some of the laws that we have that are state laws, cities cannot make it more prohibitive than what the state law is said it's going to be. And so I agree with what the state has done.
Jane?
I agree with what the state has done because to me it seems similar to the tax credit wars where Kansas will enact, some benefit for corporations and then Missouri tries to give, more money to corporations and before, it, we're running to the bottom of everybody wants to give free land to corporations. At some point you have to stop. Right now, my kids would love to get $20 an hour starting out for a job. They would love it, and it sounds like a great idea. But I think when you look at the jobs in Jefferson City, there's help wanted signs everywhere. And most of the employers are already paying more than the minimum wage just to get people to come in the door. I hear all the time from business owners, they're having trouble getting people that are willing to work and can pass a drug test to fill the jobs that they have. So they're paying more in many cases than the minimum wage. The other problem is that most of these jobs, many of them are part-time, and for people to make a living wage, they have to work more than part-time, and healthcare is the reason that many corporations have cut full-time positions back to part-time. So we need to address the healthcare issue in order to fix the wages problem. It's a short answer to a complicated problem.
Well, and I'm not certain how you stand. So you said you believe the state did the right thing in overruling the local decision.
I think that you don't want one city trying to pull in from other surrounding communities. So I think that's somewhat of a level playing field is appropriate for a minimum standard. Businesses can always pay more than the minimum wage. And what I'm saying is many of them are already doing that in order to attract workers, and they're still having difficulty attracting workers. So I think the state did the right thing.
Okay. Pat?
Well, as I look back on owning Associated Court Reporters, and we had locations in 3 different communities, I recognize that each community had a higher cost of living or had a lower cost of living. And that's what we have in this situation with the outlying cities. And I think we have to also look at the businesses to see what their needs are in those communities. So we do have in Jefferson City a great need for not only skilled workers but professional workers. And as we've all have talked to different folks across the board, they have said we need to have additionally educated folks. And so we proposed ways to do that. Now, when I owned Associated Court Reporters, when we had good, hard-working employees, which we did, we raised their percentage. They were paid a percentage. In fact, when we sold Associated Court Reporters, we were pleased to be able to negotiate the contract with the company that was making the purchase so that we protected the salaries of our employees. If they chose to become contractors, then that took them out of that protected position. So that was a wonderful thing to be able to do. But we have to allow companies, corporations, and cities to determine what is needed to bring the best quality workers to them. Now, does that make us not competitive? Absolutely not. I was offended earlier when I heard someone say that we did not have hardworking state employees. Oh my gosh. I will tell you, I was going to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was seeing lots of cars in lots of state parking lots where people were going in and working. You see it on Saturdays and Sundays. So I think we're going to get our fair share of good quality workers, skilled and professional, as we developed some of the educational issues. So at the end of the day, I always refer back to not restricting our freedoms and letting our local entities control what it is they need.
So to be clear, to clarify, where do you stand on the issue? Did the state overstep its bounds by?
I believe the state should have stayed out of it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our next question is also from a reader, Steve Bruce. During heightened awareness of the need for increased investments in school safety and child mental health supports, will you support legislative expansion of charter schools, voucher programs, or the creation of educational savings accounts that divert public funding from Missouri's public schools. Why or why not? And we'll start with Jane.
I am in favor of increased school safety. I'm not in favor of encouraging additional charter schools because the track record on charter schools is rather sketchy. Some of the schools have proven that they can provide a good education for their students, and others have proven to be almost scams. Some of the associations, universities that sponsored these charter schools have pulled out, and there's very little oversight, unlike our public schools. So I think that we need to, as far as educational savings accounts, if individuals can contribute to an educational savings account that they direct and put to whatever school they want to use, I'm in favor of that. But I'm not in favor of it detracting from our public school funding. I believe our public schools need to be funded. I believe as far as school safety, our local schools already have the choice whether or not they want to have someone on staff who carries a gun. And I do not recommend that be all teachers. I do not want that to be mandatory. That's a local school board decision. But if they have someone on staff who's ex-military or ex-law enforcement and has the training to act under pressure, under stress, and protect the students in that school, that's a decision that should be made locally. We also need to harden our targets. By doing that, we need to provide additional mental health services for children in the schools. If they're depressed or anxious, they need to be directed toward resources. And we need to be more proactive in looking for red flags. So if someone posts something on social media, says, I'm going to kill them all, or something to that effect, people need to know who to contact, how to notify the authorities, so that we avoid situations where students are killed. Because in almost all these cases, there were red flags that people ignored or were not reported.
Okay. Pat?
Well, my husband and I live in the environment of helping folks move forward and step up so that they can have a better life. Steve Bruce and I spent 2 hours together right when I first ran for office, submitted that I was going to run for office. And we did that because he was concerned, since I had been on record supporting vouchers, which is a whole different subject than supporting charters. We have 3 grandchildren at our house. Two of them, a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old, are both on the autism spectrum. So if Jefferson City could not provide the quality care that they need, absolutely. I want those kids to be able to have the best education possible. However, in our city, we've got wonderful education. Our daughter, the soon-to-be, she just retired as a lieutenant colonel, graduated from Vanderbilt, a doctor, 3 masters, 3 undergraduates. She graduated from Helias. I attribute Helias for her success. Maybe John and I had a little bit like curfew, but I attribute that quality education. Our other 3 children, the high school. Wow. Brian's at Google. Audrey is a nurse. Not just any kind of nurse. She is a ICU, intensive care nurse with oodles of degrees behind her name. And Rachel, the mother of our 2 children who are on the spectrum, she has oversight of the teachers at School of the Osage that work with our special needs. So if we at any time say that a child doesn't deserve a quality world-class education and they can't get it in our area, shame on us. We need to be out there. We need to be promoting education for all of our children. So having said that, the other quantity that I had referred to were our military children, which of course everybody knows that I live and breathe military. I come from a military family, and we've had 19-some deployments. So at the end of the day, we need to recognize that these kids have to be able to have the best school resources possible.
Dave?
Okay. I am in favor of charter schools and vouchers. I'm also in favor of a school savings program if that's needed. I think that I don't think that a one size fits all, though. I don't think that what we've got, charter schools, may not be the right answer for Jefferson City, may not be the right answer for Wardsville. I would hate to see money being taken away from public school systems because of charter schools or vouchers. This past legislature, we fully funded the foundation formula. That's the first time that's been done since 2005 when Governor Blunt instituted it. and it really was a bipartisan effort. So I think that our legislature really is keen to what the struggles that our school district are having. For them to not know how much money they're going to have in a given year, to be able to allocate towards towards funding their teachers and curriculum, I think that's wrong. And I think that I don't know whether gun safety was part of your question in this question or not, but it wasn't, was it?
Not exactly.
Okay. Well, I've got an opinion on that as well. So
I think we'll get to that one.
Okay.
All right. Pat, what are the biggest obstacles to job creation in the 60th District or Mid-Missouri, as well as the state, and what would you do about it?
Well, one of the things is starting at the base. I've spent a lot of time talking to both folks that are in the construction industry, folks at, for instance, at Midwest Block, to folks at Mills Cafe, to the guys and gals that run our hospitals. And they all have the same problem. They can't get enough qualified folks. So I had the blessing of going to a 2-year school, a technical school, a junior college. And what did I grow up to be? I grew up to be a court reporter. So I spent some 20 plus years as a court reporter that then built a business that was in 3 cities, as I said earlier. So I don't think insisting that our children get a 4-year education is the absolute end all to everything that is needed to be done. I would suggest collaborations with the companies going into the high schools, probably at the sophomore level, to start talking about what it is that they need and how to entice those folks. There is nothing wrong with getting our hands dirty and rolling up our sleeves and being a plumber or being a construction worker, and they make good money. So I think that's one of the things that we can do as we move forward with our children, is to teach them a skill set, not require them to only have an education. Of course, the other thing I am very concerned about is cybersecurity, and we have two adult children that work in that area. So I think that we need to increase the ability for all of our children across the state to have access to computers. You know, we heard earlier there were some issues in some of the rural communities. And I think that's an opportunity that we have to create another avenue stream for workers to be able to stay in their communities. We have a great community-based business here, Huber. And golly, I know one gentleman who left a job and is making not $100,000, but a very good living. Thank you.
Thank you. Dave?
Well, I think that one thing I think that we've all echoed throughout this is that not every child is meant to go to college. And my focus will be, if elected, will be in focusing on K through 12, really in giving our children a solid foundation to begin with. I know that when I first got sent to college back after I graduated from high school, that was the wrong place for me to go. It did give me high marks with the draft board at that time, but that was a blessing in disguise as well. But one of the things that the businesses look at when they're looking at coming into a state and bringing industry into a state, there are a number of boxes that they want to check off. And one of those boxes that they want to check off is, do you have a skilled workforce? And unfortunately, many of those, they can't check that box. They can't check that box, and they can't check the infrastructure box. They can't check the right to work box. There's a number of boxes that they want to look at, and education really can play a big role in that. When I went to high school, we had shop. We learned woodworking. We learned how to weld. We learned some skills that gave us some of those skills that we could use later on in our life. Like Pat, I had coffee this morning with Steve Bruce, and we were talking about the kids that really are not academically sound and really don't get it in the classroom. When you take them to Nichols Career Center and you take them to a car and you put them underneath the car, and they see a whole new world, and they open up and they thrive in that world. And so what I think we can do, we've got Missouri State Technical College that's real close to us, and there's opportunities there that we can help drive those children to and make them aware that there are other opportunities than just higher education.
Jane?
I believe there are a number of things. As been mentioned, we need access to training, technical training. I believe our community colleges and our technical schools have been very responsive to working with businesses and developing courses that so they can develop skilled workers that the employers need. For example, when the ARA funding, the American Recovery Act, came about, they developed courses to train people on energy efficient measures because that was something that was being funded. It was a new industry, and employers needed workers skilled in applying special roofs and things like that. So they provided the training, and those types of cooperative efforts need to be made. Another thing that we need to have is affordable housing. Here in Jefferson City, even if, say, Scholastic wanted to expand and had skilled workers willing to move here, where are they going to live? And when I say affordable housing, I don't mean public housing, I mean apartments that can be rented for $500 a month or less. Okay, so someone entering the workforce can afford to live in a clean, safe, decent apartment. And those are hard to come by. Almost all of our low-income housing apartment developments have been developed outside the city limits, out past the fairgrounds. Those are ones that have been funded with Missouri Housing Development, or MHDC tax credits. And because the city wants so much control by using PUDs and others, controls over the design of projects, that developers have chosen to go outside the city limits. So we need to redevelop houses and apartments so that they are clean and safe and appropriate for people with families and they can afford to rent here. We also, I know in Kansas City in the River Market, developers were hurrying to get buildings ready because tech companies were pushing to come into that area because they had high-speed internet. They had the Google Fiber years ago, and tech companies were swarming that area. They also needed apartments for the young people to live because young people don't want to mow grass on the weekends. They want to go drink beer and listen to music and have fun. Thank you.
I like to do that as well on the
Well,
weekends.
it's rather a generalization.
That's all good. And I was going to ask, did you have coffee with Steve Bruce?
No, I didn't.
All right. Okay.
Okay. For years, the legislature has been studying the issue of state employee pay and how to fix it with limited results. Do you believe state employee pay is an issue, and if so, how would you fix it? Dave?
I definitely believe state employee pay is an issue. As some of our predecessors have said, you know, the state employees are the largest workforce in our district. We need to address that. For me, it's sad that many of our state employees have got to have a second job. They work, they're public servants. They're not, many of them are not doing what they're doing because of the pay. They're doing it because they want to be a public servant. I have a good friend of mine that his wife is a lawyer, and she worked for the insurance, for State Department of Insurance. She could have quit that job and gone and hung out her own shingle and made a whole lot more money than what she was doing, but she was committed to what she was doing. So there are ways that we can increase our state employees' pay. I think through retirement and attrition, I think that's one way that we can increase it. Cutting jobs, I don't think is the answer. But this has not been a problem that's just recent. This has been a problem that we've had here in Jefferson City through a number of administrations. That when they come in, they want to cut jobs in order to meet budget. We've been able to, in order to increase the revenue within the state, we've got to attract more business. We've got to be able to bring businesses in that are going to raise the revenue to where we can afford to give our state employees the kind of compensation they deserve. The raise they're going to get in January, in my opinion, is a stipend. It's a stipend that much of that is going to go towards their insurance. So we've got to we've got to take ourselves out of being in last place to being in a place where we can attract good quality employees and treat our state employees the way they should be treated.
Jane?
I certainly agree that state employee pay is a issue. As a state employee for 25 years, I know how demoralizing it is to continue to read articles about how we're 50th in the nation. That is embarrassing and to our state and to our employees. I believe when you look at state pay there's really three components. There's salary, retirement, and health care. And I think health care is one of the areas we need to look at. In the 2019 executive budget, there was $26 million, earmarked toward a pay increase, where $675 per employee per year would have been given. But instead of $26 million toward pay increases, the legislature funded the $60 million that it would cost to increase their health care costs. So the health care costs were covered, so that's what legislators have told us for years. Well, you didn't get a pay increase, but we didn't charge you more for your health insurance either. So the problem is the health care costs are eating up the money that would have been used in the budget for state pay increases. So we need to reduce health care costs in some way. There's an incentive already. State employees can get a deduction credit for $50 if they don't smoke. So let's look at other ways our insurers can work to incentivize their insurance. Can they do that by visiting a doctor once a year to get your blood pressure checked, your blood work checked, so that we can do things that are cheaper, like a $10 a month blood pressure medication can keep somebody's blood pressure under control, whereas if it's unchecked, years from now, they'll need a kidney transplant for $500,000. It's much cheaper to do the preventive health care for less dollars than to do the drastic health care later on. It'll help us be healthier and have better quality of life. So we need to look at things like that to incentivize it. Retirement, eventually we're going to look at the difference between defined benefit and defined contribution. Defined benefit is what the traditional employees that started when I did got. Now the newer employees are looking at more like a 401k, which is more transportable, and for the millennials, it works better for them. Thank you.
Pat?
So having been a state employee for around 18 years, I definitely think that state employees need a raise. However, this is where I get to talk to you about waste, fraud, and abuse. So let's just look at, three agencies: the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Health and Senior Services, and the Department of Social Services. I strongly believe out of the $26 billion budget that was passed last year, we got some issues within those agencies. Not just those agencies. There are 16 agencies that we need to look at. So having said that, let's just talk about the SNAP program. That's some of our special services as it relates to health care. However, the Department of Social Services did not want to pay any attention to the fraud alerts that they were getting that said, oh, guess what? We got prisoners that are getting SNAP benefits. We've got folks that are dead receiving SNAP benefits. And oh, by the way, some of them don't even live in the state of Missouri. So you guys, whoever gets elected, on whatever side, I think we need to free up money by holding our state agencies accountable for the dollars that they say should come to them. Another example, several years ago, my husband and I met with both sides of the aisle, and we talked about PS, personal service, and E&E, equipment and expense. And every agency got to choose how much they wanted to have from a percentage to transfer the PS over to the E&E or vice versa. I don't want to get into the weeds here, but let's just say that the next year, they cut 400 different departments within agencies out of their PS and E&E switch because they said they didn't need it anymore. One of the ones that most disturbed me was the Department of Corrections. I sat there and listened to George Lombardi say, oh gosh, our PS and E&E switch it's called a flex, is 40%. We'll drop it to zero. Zero, think how much money they had to play with, except for the Moberly prison. So we have an opportunity to look at a lot of dollars and find out ways to better prioritize our budgets.
All right, our next question, we'll start with Jane. And the next two, we're going to have two more questions and then closing statements. Both questions, we're going to do, let's do in a minute so we can get them in, and we'll go from there. So, my question I'm asking with Jane is about gun legislation. So, you know the drill. We've done this twice before, all right? So, there are four questions. I want a yes or no answer, nothing else. Yes or no. At the end, you'll be given an opportunity to flesh out your views, okay? So, Jane, are you in favor of expanding background checks on all sales, closing what some would call a gun shop loophole?
No.
Pat?
No.
Are you in favor of increasing the minimum age for gun purchase?
No.
Jane?
No.
No.
Are you in favor of bump stocks, allowing bump stocks in high-capacity magazines?
No, and more detail later.
Yes, and more detail later.
Yes.
Are you in favor of assault weapons, and you can distinguish between semi-automatic and automatic?
Fully automatic, no. Semi-automatic, yes.
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 And lastly, are you in favor of arming educators?
No.
No.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll start with Jane. You have a minute. Flesh out your views.
On background checks, I support the regulations that are in place now. The gun shop loophole is kind of a myth because at gun shows, all the people selling guns are supposed to be licensed gun dealers and require background checks. Minimum age, I believe that is adequate as it is. The bump stocks, I don't believe we need bump stocks. High-capacity magazines, I think is a bit misleading because a pistol that normally carries 7 rounds and a 10-round magazine might be considered high-capacity. I don't see a huge difference there. So it depends on how you define magazines. Assault weapons, I think fully automatic weapons are already highly restricted and very expensive and difficult to get by the average citizen, but all the other weapons that are on the market are one trigger pull, one bullet. So no matter how they load the bullet, they operate essentially the same way. So I believe that those are appropriate. As far as arming teachers, I believe it's up to the local school boards. I believe I covered this before. I don't think it's mandatory for teachers, but the local school boards may choose some staff to be armed.
Thank you.
So I have visited with teachers, and they say to me, they don't want to be armed. They say, we want to focus on the education of our children. And so what I would propose is that we increase the dollars that are going into this local schools so that we can hire more marshals, so that we have a familiar face that knows the children that are coming. It's not always just the children that are causing these problems. There are adults as well. So then I would propose that we look back at the Department of Mental Health's gutting. Their budget has been extensively gutted over the last many years. And it's time for us to rebuild that budget, to create restricted funding for specific programs that are mandated to begin in a short period of time, so that we can reach out to our communities, to our state, to make sure that we protect our children, that we protect our communities. Now, having said that, I don't believe that we should be limiting the freedoms on anything that we do if we have the ability to figure out a way to collaborate and create a safety net for our children.
Dave?
As you can tell by my answers, I'm a very strong advocate for the Second Amendment. I think that any time we start restricting guns and we start putting guidelines on things that, as far as owning what kind of guns you own and what kind of ammunition you can have and anything that goes down that road, the gun is really not the problem. I mean, we can look at London has more homicides than the city of New York, and they're all with knives. So what are we going to, if we end up with that problem, or are we going to start banning knives and those kind of things? With schools having somebody that's armed inside the school, now I'm not saying that every school teacher should be armed. I think that there should be somebody in that school that doesn't have that has the background of protection, that nobody else knows who that person is, but they can act when the time comes that it needs to happen.
Thank you.
All right, we have another reader-submitted question. This one was from Shelley Sawyer and Jeannie McGowan. What are your thoughts about limiting lobbyist gifts and contributions and more transparency in campaign finances? Do you support the Clean Missouri Amendment? And we'll do 1 minute. Start with Pat.
So the answer to do I support the Clean Missouri Amendment is no. The answer to the other questions is yes. So the reason I don't support the Missouri Clean Amendment as it is written right now is it violates a black letter of law, the single issue rule. So you can't lump a whole bunch of different things into one piece of legislation that don't add up. So here we are, banning lobbyist gifts, yet this particular issue also includes the redistricting. What part of that meshes up. So somebody earlier said they wanted to have clearer, cleaner legislation. Yes, I support that. So of course I don't want black money. However, I do want us to be able to have clean legislation, which that doesn't meet it.
Dave?
I do not support Clean Missouri for a number of reasons, but I do support transparency. I really think that over the last few years that Missouri has done a really good job as far as ethics, our ethics commission goes, in really restricting the amount of contributions that can be given to a candidate. You can't get more than $2,600 from one individual. You can't get $2,600 from more than one PAC, from the same PAC. So we've done that, and we made that transparent through the quarterly filings that we have, where we're showing the public how much money we've spent and where we spent it and what our expenses are. And but I think that the more transparent we can be, lobbyists are a necessity. They're a necessity for a lot of us, and especially for freshmen that come in. And it really, they have the empirical knowledge, but we've got to have the fortitude to be able to discern and make our own decisions.
Jane?
If elected, I would put up a sign that says no lobbyist gifts, we don't need coffee mugs, we don't need sports tickets, we don't need food, and really just discourage any lobbyist gifts in whatever. I believe that the Clean Missouri Amendment language regarding campaign limits has largely been addressed with legislation put in place in 2016. So that, as Dave said, there's already restrictions on individual contributions up to $2,600 per person per election. There's no corporate contributions, and there's no contributions from one campaign fund to another. So I think we've improved the transparency there. I think one of the things I have a big problem with on Clean Missouri, so I would not support it, is the appointed state demographer position to dictate the redistricting. I believe that's the legislature's responsibility. That's why they're elected, and that should not be in the hands of an appointed official. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to do our closing statements. We'll start with Dave. You have a minute.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight and for taking your time to listen to us. Each one of us that are here have got many of the same values and many of the same thoughts of what we want to do, and that is really to do the best for the people in the state of Missouri. I've received the endorsement of Missouri Right to Life. I've received the endorsement of the Missouri FOP, and those give me the confidence that they believe in what I do. I've read a book, it's called The Four Agreements. In the Four Agreements, it is be impeccable with your word, never make assumptions, don't take things personally, and always do your best. And that's exactly what I'm going to do when I'm elected as the next representative for the 60th District, and I would appreciate your support and your vote on August 6th.
Thank you. Jane?
A lot of people have asked me in this campaign, why would you want to do that? I thought you were smarter than that. And I was amazed knocking on doors a few weeks ago. A gentleman, after, I did not know him, but after about a minute, he said, how can I help you? And that shocked me. I was not prepared for that response. But I appreciate people like that and people like you who have come out to listen tonight, to participate in the political process, those that have watched this online. I appreciate that. I appreciate the News Tribune and the city for putting this together. You all do a great job. I think there are a number of things that I would like to see Jefferson City thrive and grow, and I would like to increase my level of community service. Even after 25 years of being with state government, I think I have skills that I can bring to this and would appreciate your vote. I would ask you to vote for me on Tuesday, August 7th. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat?
Thanks, Roberta and Gary, for taking this on today and yesterday and the ones that you have coming up. And thank you guys and gals for being here, because without each one of you, we can't represent your values. I'm a conservative, as I said. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a Christian. And what I believe in is CUR, knowledge, experience brings responsible results. I am the only candidate that has all of that. And I too have been endorsed by Missouri Right to Life, and I look forward to working with my colleagues who I visited with and I've worked on legislative pieces with, and I look forward to being the voice for you all and to listening to what you want to have done at the state legislature. You know, my colleague from my church said it well when he said, this isn't about us, it's about you. And if we ever forget that, then we need to go home. So I too would ask that when you're going through that ballot and deciding who will best represent you, who has got the strongest leadership skill and has been a proven leader, you vote for me, Pat Roker. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I thank all three candidates for coming to this forum and answering our questions. We appreciate your presence here. I thank those here in the audience who, first of all, endured the heat. The air conditioning's back, thankfully. And I appreciate the city offering us the opportunity to use these facilities. Lastly, I would encourage all those who are listening to get out and vote August 7th. Our goal through all these forums is to have an informed electorate. And throughout this election season and the coming days, we will be submitting more questions to the candidates, some from readers, some from ourselves. The goal, again, is to have an informed electorate, to know who they're electing and why they're electing them. So, and then to get out and vote. So, again, August 7th, get out and vote, and thank you for your presence tonight.